This is Jay Frost speaking to you from a very noisy Dulles airport, but so happy to be with you. If you're grooving on that music, it may be also because my colleague here, Terrence Diggs, is in the background humming along as well. Very happy to have you join us in another one of these 2019 Flash classes brought to you, of course, by DonorSearch, as you know. We won't be talking much about DonorSearch today, because once again, DonorSearch is just providing us this platform to bring you some of the top voices in philanthropy and fundraising. We are certainly doing that with someone today whose name I'm sure you know, and someone I've been following for a long time as well. So happy to have her here. But before we do the proper introduction, I just want to welcome you and encourage you to go and grab your colleagues, get something nice to drink, get something comfortable to sit on, and gather around your favorite screen for another great session in this series. For the next couple of minutes, I'll just be reintroducing the platform, telling you how you can get the content after the fact and how you can engage with our presenter during the presentation today. So go ahead and grab your colleagues if you've heard this before, and if you haven't, sit tight for just a couple of minutes to make sure you can completely engage with this material and this great presenter. We're going to start right at the top, of course, by telling you how you can get this content. And as usual, you can have access to both the slides and a recording, and the slides will be particularly important in this occasion for reasons that our presenter will tell you. There's a little more content than she could possibly provide in this session, but we are so happy she's going to be able to provide any of it, and so she'll be telling you all about that in a second. But that slide deck will be coming to you via email. It's also, I believe, attached here as a handout, so you'll be happy to know that. And a recording where she will share so much of the content with you will also be posted along with the others in the Flash Class Library under the Resources tab, as you can see on your screen right there, in the next couple of days. To get that, you'd simply go to DonorSearch.net, click on Resources, go to Flash Class Library, and clicking that, you'd find a screen just like this one. It's our searchable content library that brings you to all the sessions in this series going back to mid-2016. Lots of stuff there, over 180, maybe 185 sessions now. We have lost track, and you can search for the content for this session in just, again, the next couple of days. Now, of course, we've silenced your mics so they don't sound as noisy as mine, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If you'll take a look for your GoToWebinar control panel, which is typically on the right side of your screen, but you may find up, down, or to the left, right dead center in the middle of it, you'll find the Questions tab. It's a perfect place to go ahead and post your questions or comments at any point during the presentation. And in this case, those will be visible to our presenter. I'll also be monitoring here in the background, and then I'll try to help facilitate the questions at the conclusion. But don't wait, don't hesitate. Go ahead and post your questions or comments at any time so that she can see them. And then again, towards the end of the presentation, I can help to take those and provide those to her so she can answer your questions and other thoughts. Now, in terms of the presentation, as you probably know, today is that really, really key issue about how to future-proof your social media strategy with who else but Kivi Leroux Miller. This is a person who, again, you probably know by reputation, if not personally. She's the founder and CEO of the Nonprofit Marketing Guide, where she helps nonprofit communication professionals learn their jobs and love their jobs through a variety of training and coaching. She's personally mentored over 150 nonprofit communications directors and communication teams as a certified executive coach. You've probably seen her on the stump, though, as a keynote, workshop, webinar presenter. She does that dozens of times a year. In fact, she's off to St. Louis after this presentation, I believe. And she's been doing this work for quite a long time also as an author, which is, of course, where I knew her work first, and perhaps where you've been introduced to it. She's the author of 3 books, as well as a popular blog. Those books include Calm, Not Busy, How to Manage Your Nonprofit's Communications for Great Results, Content Marketing for Nonprofits, Communications Map for Engaging Your Community, Becoming a Favorite Cause, and Raising More Money, which was the winner of the 2014 Terry McAdam Award, and the Nonprofit Marketing Guide. What else? High Impact, Low Cost Ways to Build Support for Your Good Cause. And that's from Jossie Bass, just like the Content Marketing book. So we are so pleased to have on the Flash Class stage, Kivi Leroux Miller. Kivi, take it away.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Terrence. Let me get the correct screen showing for you all here. All right, so again, I'm so glad to be here with you all talking about social media. I want you to find your questions window and answer a question for me as we get started. How would you complete this sentence when you're thinking about Social media, mostly at work, but also in your private life. Social media is such a, how would you complete the sentence? Find your questions window and go to webinar and answer that sentence for me, fill in the blank for me. And as I'm waiting for those to come in, I'll just tell you a teeny bit more about Nonprofit Marketing Guide. So we have tons of free content. We blog Monday through Friday. We have a Wednesday newsletter, all kinds of helpful downloads on our website. We do constant training webinars, usually 2 to 3 a month. We have a communications director mentoring program, which is a 6-month program where you get to spend a lot of time with me and other communications directors. And as Jay said, I've written a bunch of books. We also do some of the leading research on communications for nonprofits each year with our annual trends report. So we have a lot of experience with communications professionals, but we also have a ton of data on what's happening out there related to communications and marketing. And again, those trends reports are free. So just go to Nonprofit Marketing Guide and check them out. So how are you all completing the sentence? It is a perfect nonprofit tool. It's a necessity. It's a pain. It's an opportunity. It's a rabbit hole. It's a chore. It's a mixed bag. It's overstimulating and inconvenient. So you can see it's good and bad, right? And certainly social media has gotten a lot of negative press lately, very deserved negative press. There have been huge privacy and data breaches. It can be really creepy when you're doing something online and then Facebook suddenly shows you an ad about something because of that cookie. It's really designed to be addictive. A lot of the early developers have come out and said now, yes, we designed this so you can't put it down. And that often creates anxiety and depression. And then, of course, as a manager of social media, there are constant changes to the way it works and to the algorithms and what works and what doesn't. So the whole thing, especially for nonprofits, can feel like a big bait and switch. We were all told to get all of our social media followers, but now guess what? You have to pay in order for most of those followers to see your stuff. So, of course, this is all the bad stuff. But the reality is that we can't really get away from it. Well over half, closer to 2/3 or 3/4 of adults are using social media on a daily basis. And of course, Facebook is the big behemoth in the room. Facebook is used by 70% of adults on a daily basis in the US. YouTube is right up there as well. You'll notice that everyone else sort of trails, but the one thing I do want to point out to you is the upward incline still of Instagram. I'm going to show you a lot of Instagram examples today as we go through this. And of course, Facebook owns Instagram. So that's important to know, but we're really talking about Facebook and Instagram in terms of the leading social platforms for nonprofits today. And again, as I said, you really can't get away from it because that's where your donors and supporters are living out their lives. They are on Facebook regularly, and not only that, they expect to find news on Facebook, which is kind of scary given how much fake news is out there. But nevertheless, we cannot get away from managing social media. It is embedded into modern life, especially in the US. Now, wouldn't it be nice then if social media could magically solve all of our problems as nonprofit fundraisers and communicators? And early on, I think there was an expectation. You may still have some board members and maybe even executive directors that think if you just knew how to do social media right, you'd solve all your problems. But of course, that's not true either. It is really just one more tool that you need to learn how to manage and use appropriately for your organization. So the question then becomes, with all of these positive and negatives out there, what is really the most strategic approach for nonprofits? Remember, social media is just one of many communications tactics out there. We do some training at Nonprofit Marketing Guide where we have this card deck and we let people shuffle the cards to come up with their perfect hand. And so these are the tactical cards in that deck. But before you can really get to tactics, you really have to know why you're doing it. So to create a plan, you have to start with your goals. And these are the 12 goals that communications professionals are most often working on in the nonprofit sector. And odds are you're working on probably half of these and maybe even more than that. So we have engagement goals, awareness goals, raising issue awareness, getting people to take action, recruiting participants and volunteers, and of course, all of the fundraising goals as well. How do we measure whether we're up to those goals or not? Well, we also have 12 objectives that we talk about at Nonprofit Marketing Guide. So these include everything from whether someone is joining in, are they learning more from you, is their satisfaction increased, is your level of influence with those people increased, are they ready to do something different, are they participating? You really have to narrow down what it is you're trying to accomplish in order to pick the best tool and then to use that tool appropriately. And again, we're talking about social media as being the primary tool today. So where do you start then? Well, social media could be used for all of those 12 goals that I put up there and for most of those objectives too. But that's overwhelming, and that's going to mislead you into what's really the best strategic use of the tool. So instead of looking at all of that mess I just showed you, what I'm going to encourage you to do today is just to focus in on these two objectives. I want to encourage you to use social media for building trust and getting expressions of trust from your followers and building your influence with them so that they allow you to influence their behavior and to really act when you put a call to action in front of them. These two objectives as a social media strategy are future proof. Doesn't really matter how the Facebook algorithm changes. And they're actually platform free. This isn't a strategy that works only on Facebook or only on Twitter. Building trust and building influence work across all social channels. And they are never a waste of your time. So I'm sure some of you have coworkers or maybe even yourself who thinks, well, social media is just a waste of time for the kind of fundraising I do. And my argument back to you would be building trust, building influence is never a waste of time, regardless of what kind of fundraising you're doing. Trust and influence are always extremely valuable. And so if you use social media in that way, it will produce results for you. Now, how do you build trust? How do you build influence? Two things. You have to be personal and you have to be practical. So I'm going to build out a little chart here for you about how you do this. And then we're going to talk mostly about the things on the left because that's where nonprofits, I believe, are failing in a lot of cases. But I'm going to give you all the content from the right side of the chart in the slides. Even if we can't really talk about it today, you'll have it. So let's look at that. So we're going to look at the be personal side. And again, this is the side where I think most nonprofits are not really understanding or grasping or implementing what's really required in order to use social media appropriately. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to document, don't create. This is really about authenticity, sharing the journey, that ephemeral content, which is the content that disappears after 24 hours. It's most often referred to as stories, particularly on Instagram, but now also on Facebook. We're going to figure out how to use social media to build one-to-one connections. And this is really where we have a service mentality. We're looking at private messaging and also personal brands for individual staff people. And then we're showing up and hanging out. And the way that we do that on social is through live video streaming, groups, hashtags, and events. So again, I'm going to spend most of my time on this side, but you also have all the content on the right. So the practical side of this is really about the content that you're putting up on social media. So I'm going to want you to focus on some core topics, really know your niche, become the influencer. Nonprofits spend a lot of time trying to connect with influencers who they think are going to open doors for them. And I would argue that you're the influencer. So you need to match your channels to your content. Then you need to create relevant content. And I give you a bunch of advice on what relevant really means in terms of actually deciding what you're putting online. And then, of course, I want you to repurpose that content and really create less but great content and share it more often. If you're putting something on social media one time and then moving on and never posting that thing again, you're probably doing it wrong. That's not an absolute, but you can be sharing and resharing your content a lot more than you probably are. Okay, so let's dive right on into it. Feel free to send in questions as we go through. I'm going to try to keep an eye on them, and Jay will keep an eye on them as well. And just feel free to break in if I'm missing something, Jay, at any time. All right, so we're going to start with that top blurb there on documenting, don't create. What does that mean? Well, again, we're trying to be really personal. Social media doesn't work if people think it's really coming from a monolithic beast of an organization. People want to be social with other people who work at that organization. So it doesn't work to really outsource your personality to people. And that doesn't mean that you can't use consultants or interns to help you with this, but those people really need to understand who you are as an organization, and there really needs to be a lot of communication with those people so they get it right. It's just like outsourcing your own personality as a human being to someone. You'd want to have a lot of control over how that's going, right? So the first thing we need to talk about then is authenticity. And I'd actually like you to go to your questions window and answer this question for me again. What does that mean for your organization? The word authenticity, what do you think that that means in terms of the way your organization portrays itself on social media? And what might it not mean? This is a very, very important word when you're developing your social media strategy. You really have to be authentic for social to work for you. So what does authenticity actually mean? So some of the things that you all are typing in: not scripted, true and transparent, the voice in the community, okay, real, factual, being true to the missions and values, relating to people, being an active member of a community. These are all things you all are typing in, which are all great answers. Being accessible, being consistent, sharing information. Okay, great, good. So here's some different ways to find authentic moments. And you really do have to figure out where your voice is and who your voices are. It's really important to understand that you're talking about yourselves here. And I find that fundraisers in particular have a really hard time with this because you all are so steeped in the donor-centered culture, right? Everything is about the donor. It's all about them. We don't talk about ourselves. And generally speaking, in broader donor communications, that's true. However, on social media, it doesn't really work 100% of the time. Okay, there are definitely times when you want to be donor-centered, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about the service mentality. But this is a relationship on social. It's a two-way street, and you really have to talk about what's happening behind closed doors in order to be authentic. So I want you to think more broadly than donor centrism, and I want you to think more broadly about your direct calls to action. So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So someone posted on Facebook in a sort of fundraising social media group about they have this great program at this hospital with these adorable photos, but this person who posted was like, I can't use this because I don't actually have to raise money for this program. This program is funded in a different way, so I can't talk about this program for fundraising. And of course, I'm like, yes, you can. That's ridiculous. This is perfectly on brand content. It doesn't matter that you're not actually fundraising for it. You want to talk about this program because it's an example of the kind of organization you are and the kind of great things that are happening. Just because you don't have to fundraise for it doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. So I really want you to think more broadly about the kinds of things that are going on within the culture of your organization that you could share, and really apply some of that learning that you've done around storytelling and sharing stories with donors, mostly about other donors or about clients, and really turning that on yourself a little bit to really introduce the people that are working at your organization. Other ways to do that. Why do you do what you do as an individual? Why do you work where you work? Odds are it's not for the paycheck and benefits in the nonprofit sector. So there's probably other really good reasons why you're at work. What is it that happens during your day that makes it all worth it? Here's some other ways to be authentic. How do you keep doing it even when it's hard? So here's an example of an organization that often, the overwhelming majority of their content is about their clients, but they occasionally post things like, you know what, it's really hard to do this work. It's really hard to work with kids that have been abused. And so they're talking about PTSD for people that work in children's services. That's good social content because it's authentic, it's real. You can talk about your frustrations, talk about what you love, talk about the things that you talk about after work. What are the things that drive you, even after you leave the office, to still be thinking about your job? Those are probably things that you should also be talking about if you're trying to be authentic with your larger community. What are you learning? What are some reactions that you might have to news and culture? Memes are fine too if they reflect how everyone in the office is feeling. Just don't go too overboard with them. So another way to really get at this personality and being authentic is to really share the journey. So you want to take us behind the scenes. Tell us what's happening before you go into a big meeting on the work you do, or if you're at a conference, what are you hoping to learn from the conference? And then tell us what you got out of it afterwards. You can say, let's go see what's happening with so-and-so today. Which of your programs, visit one of your program offices, or visit a staff person, or visit the front desk, and just tell us what's going on. Tell a small little vignette of a story. If you work in a boring office, like a lot of us do, and you feel like, I got nothing to photograph here, I have nothing good for Instagram, go close up, zoom in on an interesting mug in your mug collection in the kitchen, or maybe zoom in on a book on your bookshelf, or one of your little tchotchkes on your desk, and tell the story behind that. Again, these things can seem really kind of simple, and they are, but again, it's all about making that personal human connection with people. Describe your own creative process. I think it's really boring personally when I'm talking to people about how I write a book. But when I talk about that, people are just like rapt, like I'm telling them the best story ever. So the things that you feel are just everyday ho-hum, yes, this is what I do, other people are actually really excited to see your process. So describe that. Show off your teamwork, friendships at work, again, when you're learning new things, and anything funny or quirky that's happening. If people are singing a song around the office, that could be a social media post. Here's, just a simple little vignette that ended up getting tremendous play on social for Boston Children's Hospital. They're celebrating one of their clients, one of their patients, a little kid, but the construction guys that were working outside walked him into the lobby because the kid was really into construction workers. So it's just a cute little moment in time. Yeah, it's not a big fundraising appeal, but when you post things like this, it really tells us who you are as an organization. And that's what matters. That's what's going to build the trust and influence. Okay, let's talk a little bit about ephemeral content now, which is the fancy big word for content that disappears. And again, we're most often talking about the story format. Story format, again, you want it to be very casual content. Typically, it's very in the moment. So the behind the scenes shots are really popular story content. But you can also do things that are more kind of lifestyle writing, more sort of listicle in nature. So here we have the SPCA is doing household dangers for your pets room by room. And so each little bit of the story goes into a room and talks about what's going on there. Quizzes are also really big on story content, especially on Instagram. Instagram has all these stickers now. And the way you see those is you just swipe up from the bottom when you're posting a story. So you can do these sort of quizzes and polls. Cleveland Clinic does a tremendous job with the Instagram sticker, polling, and quiz content. They are near constant with it, and it is super engaging. So that's a really good place to look if you want some advice on how to do this well. You can also just be really inspirational and positive with your social content. This is especially true on Instagram. Facebook tends to be the place where there's a lot more kind of argument, debate about things. Instagram tends to be a much more positive platform. So you can post these sorts of, inspirational sayings and quotes are really big. There are a lot of these hashtags like Motivation Monday where you can sort of chime in with something positive. More tips for story content. Really figure out what you want to be known for and come up with those categories and then place your categories in your highlights. So you can see here PETA has news, rescues, and takeovers. If you look at World Wildlife, they've got a whole bunch of different stuff, and I can't tell what any of that is, so why would I click on any of it? You really want to be able to sort of to name what it is that you're doing. So come up with a couple of types of content and then add that to your highlights on Instagram. So good categories, again, would be things like questions, quizzes, behind the scenes photos, personal reflections, your core topics. So, maybe you talk about cats, dogs, and birds, that kind of thing. You could put that there. You could also do factoids, frequently asked questions. You could put gratitude to donors up there. You could have one about your impact, but just sort of figure out, okay, we're going to really be known. Our stories are going to be this kind of content. Just pick a couple of things and go ahead and build your strategy around that. All right, so the next section on Be Personal, again, we're staying on the left-hand side of that big graphic I showed you, is building the one-on-one connections. This is the part that freaks most nonprofits out because most of you have not invested in the staff that it's going to take to do this right. So take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. These are the kinds of things you just need to start thinking about with your management team and budgeting for long term. And this is much more kind of simpatico with donor centrism. So while in the last section I was talking you need to talk all about yourself and all the stuff you're doing, this next section really is about service and servicing donors and servicing other community members. You're going to have to deal with the DMs and the private messaging if you're not yet. Some of you already do a lot of this. Some of you probably have it turned off. And you're going to have to figure out a way to manage the messaging coming through your social platforms from individuals if you're not doing that already. So go into the settings and start to customize them. You're usually going to want to do at least some partial automation. These are screen captures from Facebook. So you can now set a schedule when staff are going to be available to answer questions. You can do some immediate responses. You can start working on a bot. This is artificial intelligence that can have a conversation with your supporters and can answer basic questions for them, and then basically route people to the right staff person. This is what the part that a lot of people just like, I can't do this. We're not doing this. You're going to have to do it at some point. It may be a year from now, it may be 3 years from now, but this is the artificial intelligence. This is where things are headed. Most of the customer service chats that you see on websites now for commercial companies where you might buy stuff, they are bots. And they start as bots, and then you only get a real person after you've gone through a couple of layers to sort of figure out what's going on. That's going to be a part of our workload in the nonprofit sector in the not too distant future. There are a number of large nonprofits right now that are really investing in this. And once they start doing it, it sort of trickles down to everyone else too. You can use the channels in lots of strategic ways. One is for those of you that deal with more sensitive issues or things that people like to fight about in public. is to use your channels to take comments private into a private channel so you can stop having that fight in public. But it's also a new marketing channel. And this is one of those love it or hate it things. I know I hate getting ads in Facebook Messenger, but the reality is that Facebook is selling ads in Facebook Messenger. They know that the news feed is problematic. That's where all the Russian fake news was, right? So they are moving away from the news feed, which means they're not going to be able to show ads in the news feed. So where are they going to show you ads? Because they still got to show ads. They're going to show ads in the story content. The newsfeed is going to look more like stories, and they're going to show ads in Messenger. So this is a channel that's happening, even if you don't want it to happen. And a lot of the best practices are going to be very similar to email. So if you're already doing a robust email opt-in program, you're already segmenting your email, you're going to be able to really apply those same broader concepts to the private messaging pieces of social. You'll be able to manage those, you'll be able to segment them, you'll be able to get opt-ins, you'll be able to send different types of content to different types of people, just like you do with email. That's where things are headed. As we're going through this, then, you know, you're answering people on Messenger, but you're answering as an employee of your nonprofit. Are you speaking as the brand, or are you speaking as a human being? Who are you speaking as? Those are conversations that you need to be having within your organization, because, for example, pages can be members of groups on Facebook now. And so we, as other group members, won't necessarily know who's talking. So how do we manage all of that? It's a conversation you have to have within your organization. There is no right or wrong answer. For some organizations, especially those that are founder-led, or that you have a lot of sort of on-the-ground grassroots staff, people already have personal relationships with the majority of the individuals working at your nonprofit. So this is going to be a little easier. For those of you that work for big national brands, you don't really want them to know, you know, it's Jill or Bob or Jane talking. You want to be speaking as the brand, but people don't want to talk to a brand. So how do you manage that? The compromise is probably signing branded posts. We see a lot of this on Twitter, on customer service channels for Twitter, where they're posting as the brand, but then in parentheses or with the little caret mark, you've got people's initials or names after it, so you know the customer service agent you're talking to. We'll probably end up seeing a lot more of that in nonprofits as well. The final block on be personal and show up, video. Facebook is dumping huge quantities of money and resources into Facebook Live, which is the live streaming platform. They are also still investing in the recorded video tools, but they're really pushing live streaming. And live streaming can be really scary. But again, what I'm trying to do here is not tell you you need to be doing this now, but be telling you that you need to be having these conversations now so that you're ready to move into these places in the future. This is how you're future-proofing your social media. So you can go live from your phone. You can attach microphones, better lighting, but you can also go live from browser apps, and you can get full-blown desktop software that basically lets you look like you're in a studio with lower thirds and stuff buzzing in and off the screen, graphics, etc. But you're broadcasting via Facebook Live. It's very easy to get overwhelmed very quickly, so don't worry about that. Just pace yourself. The length of your videos doesn't matter so much. You can go live for a minute or you can go live for 2 hours. We see both happening. Don't get hung up on the live engagement numbers, like how many people are watching you live. Just go ahead and repost that content so it's up there as a video, and that content will be seen by other people, even if they're not responding to it. And of course, This is new, and so there are a couple places I recommend you get training. One is called a company called Livestreaming Pros, and then I'm also doing some additional webinars on that. Other places you can engage with others, groups. Again, this is mostly on Facebook right now, but you want to think about different ways that your organization can get people together to talk about your issues. And it may be a couple of different kinds of groups. You can ask people questions to make the group exclusive. You cannot let everybody in. Just let in certain people who meet the criteria to be a member of the group. And there are ways that you can sort of pre-approve people. You can upload a list of names. So if people are trying to get in, there's some automation that you can do here. But the important part is that Facebook, again, long-term, is moving back towards groups. If you've been doing this as long as I've been doing it, you probably remember before brands had pages, every brand had a group. And then Facebook invested all this money in pages and everybody moved, they converted groups to pages. Well, guess what? We're going back. We're going back to groups now so that we have more control over who is in the group. Events, Facebook's also spending a lot of time on events. You can now set them up as an individual, a page, or as a group. And what we see most successfully is people who are mixing online and in-person events. You can advertise to people that have said they are interested in your events. Same goes with video. So one of the reasons you post events now, and one of the reasons you post video, is so that you can advertise something else to those people. You can advertise to people that have RSVP'd for events or watched video. Those are warm leads, essentially. And then you can ask them to donate or volunteer or advocate or whatever else you're asking them to do, even if that new call to action isn't necessarily related. Video events, again, Facebook is trying to get you to do more video, so you can do these events around videos called watch parties and premieres now. Hashtags, and then we'll sort of stop and take some questions. So hashtags, still important, mostly on Instagram and Twitter, not that helpful on Facebook still. But they're still important for people discovering you when they're searching, and also important for you to discover others who are interested in the same things you are. So it's still a great way to listen and find influencers and active community members. How many do you need? You need more on Instagram than other places. And there are different types of hashtags. So you probably want one that's sort of related to your organization or campaign, but you can also use descriptive hashtags, the thing you're talking about. Different kinds of communities or different kinds of groups have hashtags. You can also do location-based hashtags for you, those of you that really do work in a pretty defined geographic area. So the bottom line with all of this, to sort of sum up all of this stuff I just went through, is really this quote from Mark Zuckerberg. Private messaging, ephemeral stories, and small groups are by far the fastest growing areas of online communication. If that's what he believes, that's where he's taking Facebook and Instagram. So that's what I've talked to you about today, is really understanding how to be authentic, how to really use the private messaging tools, how to use the ephemeral 24-hour story tools, and how to reinvest in groups. This is where social is headed, in some ways headed back, but this is where it's going. And so you've got to figure out how to use these tools to build that trust and influence over time. Okay, so I have just gone through all of this on the left. I'm happy to take any questions about what we've talked about so far, and then I will sort of breeze through some of this content on the right, knowing that you have the full slide deck, so you can go look at a lot more of the examples. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the examples on the right. But what questions do you have for me about what we've talked about so far?
I see a number of questions here, Kivi. I don't know if you can see them. One came in from Samantha asking about how do privacy issues play into this, especially universities that have to contend with FERPA rules?
So, I mean, okay, so there's like big picture privacy, like all of us getting our stuff stolen and our data sold privacy. And then it kind of gets down to more specific privacy rules that regulate different kinds of organizations, whether it's universities or healthcare or domestic violence shelters. And so I think we have to talk about the sort of larger privacy issues as well as those that are really specific to the work that you're doing. And you know, the guiding principle is always that you're protecting the people that you're serving. So some of this is really about educating your community and really having them opt into some of this. Like there is value in having people who are struggling in some way be able to talk to each other, right? And for you to be able to facilitate that. But in order for that to happen, they have to give consent to be in a Facebook group with other survivors or whoever they're with. So you're going to have to work out some of that dynamic and really making sure that you're educating the people you're serving about what their responsibilities are in those circumstances and what privacy they're giving up by entering a Facebook group that you're managing, for example. Messenger, like the private messaging, I think is actually a good way to help protect some people's privacy because you're taking it off of the page and off of the public sphere. And again, we see a lot of organizations using messaging that way. People who are in desperate need of help will post ridiculous amounts of private information on a nonprofit's page because they are so desperate for help. And so we see organizations seeing that on their page or in groups, you know, massive groups, and asking those people to take the conversation private via the social media messaging platform. That's depending on where the platform is that they're built. So I think you just kind of have to work through those issues.
Well, in fact, you just anticipated a question from Grant. He was asking about how do you encourage conversations to move to private messages, and I think you were just tackling that. We had, which is great, we had a comment earlier from Sarah asking about what you think of LinkedIn groups versus the Facebook groups. You were talking about that movement away from groups and then back to groups. So what about with other platforms like LinkedIn?
So, you know, LinkedIn is obviously when you're talking to people in a professional capacity, right? So you have to have a reason for them to want to talk to you because of their job and your job. I think LinkedIn is, this is my personal opinion, I think LinkedIn is really behind the times in managing their groups. Their groups tend to still be fairly spammy. Again, just my personal opinion. And it seems to be a lot more, it's less about serving others and being helpful to others and more about like, who can I get, who can I meet, and what can I get out of this? So the whole vibe is just different there. And I do think they're working on that. But again, for a typical kind of donor relationship, I don't think you're going to have that on LinkedIn the way that you would have it on Instagram or Twitter.
Right, right. We had a question from Russell about your opinion about workplace for Facebook. Do you have any thoughts about that?
You know, there are all these different sort of productivity tools out there for your office, and my response is you need to use one of them, but I don't have any particular yay or nay on workplace. It's for my main goal is for you all to like create less internal email ultimately. Way too much internal work is happening on email. We all have way too much in our inboxes. So any kind of internal messaging tool that can sort of get you out of email and 15 emails to your coworkers every day is a good thing.
We have a comment from Brian. He said he must have missed it. Could you comment again on Gary V's document, don't create, which is one of those blue bubbles on the left?
Yes, so this is something that Gary came up with, this sort of document, don't create. So the idea here is that you don't have to just create a lot of content, which is really kind of what we're talking about on this side of the chart, But a lot of people think, oh, I can't do social media well because I don't have a videographer, I don't have a full-time graphic designer, I don't, I can't write really well, I can't make all of this gorgeous, incredibly beautiful stuff. So therefore, I can't do social. And what Gary is trying to say is that to really do social well, you don't actually have to create anything. You just have to document what you're doing. So it's really about the behind the scenes, like taking people along the journey with you and just taking a picture of what you're doing instead of making a beautiful graphic about what you're doing. So that's what he means by document, don't create. It's really just that taking people with you on that journey in a very authentic, unedited, real life kind of way.
Right. That authenticity principle is, yes, that's that's exactly what's central to that. We have a comment from Valina who says, how do you get started in social media and signing up for older staff who fear social media? I suspect you could talk about this all day, but do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So, this is where I think people find comfort in the success of others. And so usually what I do is try to figure out what organizations they admire now, like not necessarily on social, but just who they want to be when they grow up. Who does your nonprofit want to be when you grow up? And show them the kinds of things that they're doing. And then say, okay, what's like one little baby step that our organization could take to be more like that organization?
Now we have a interesting comment from Kit saying that we have experts on staff, PhDs. Would
Mhm.
audiences respond to short videos of them sharing about impact of their programmatic work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if they don't look like they've rehearsed it 30,000 times before you recorded it. A lot of this is that kind of spontaneous authenticity that people are looking for. It's okay to rehearse, don't get me wrong. And certainly people will feel more comfortable if maybe they've run through it a couple of times, but absolutely get that expertise out there. That's another way to sort of build trust and influence, right? Is like, oh, they're not just saying they have experts, they're showing me they're experts. I can hear they're experts, I can see them. So absolutely share some of that. I think I'm going to rein it back in because I just want to make sure that you all know what you have available to you in the slides, if that's okay. And then we'll take a few more questions in just a minute. Okay, so the other side, like I said, I'm not going to go through all this in the level of detail I did because I think nonprofits are generally better at the content creation side, but I just want to hit the highlights and then you all have the deck or will get it and you can see all the examples for yourself and go through the detail at your leisure. So the first thing is really to know your niche, know what you're talking about, and it really does pay to specialize in social. You can specialize in one topic for a couple months and then change the topic if you want, but get specific and be specific regularly. That's what's interesting. When you're covering too many things, it just seems completely scatterbrained, or it's just not interesting. It's too generic, and so it's boring. So there are lots of different ways to specialize, but you do need to specialize. As I said earlier at the top, quit trying to influence other people so much, like, oh, I just need to get a movie star or an NBA player to tweet me and we'll be great. You be the influencer, okay? We also call this being the thought leader. So you can do that. It does require knowledge and passion. I always say that thought leaders are experts who are also good marketers. You can't have one without the other and be a thought leader. But you have to really know who you're talking to. I think it's easier to be a big fish in a small pond. So what I mean by that is to, again, narrow the niche. Don't try to, be the organization that's talking about children. Children is kind of a big topic. So pick something that's much more narrow and specific and try to be the influencer on that. You do want to match your channels to your content. And so I will spend a little bit of time on this. What's the difference between Facebook and Instagram and all the rest of it today? If I was starting from scratch, this is what I would do. Now that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do this because you're not starting from scratch, but this is where you want to move towards. So Facebook pages should be all about video and live streams and groups. Okay, quit worrying so much about what you're posting. on your page. I'm telling you, the news feed, it's going to look real different in a year or two. It may be completely gone as we know it. So start looking at these other pieces of Facebook that are getting all the investment. Look at your ad strategy. Look at Messenger, the things that we talked about. On Instagram, you do want the nice visuals, close-ups of things if you think you're working in a boring office again. And then it really is fine to put text posts up. I did a blog post recently about how the majority of Instagram posts from the ACLU are screen captures of their tweets. They're not even retyping the stuff into Instagram. They're just taking a screen capture of a tweet and putting it on a colorful background and then posting that to Instagram, and it works, okay? I would still say photos are better, but don't use your lack of photos as an excuse to not have an Instagram strategy. Also think about user-generated content. So you can repost people's things. And then again, stories, the ephemeral content, less refined. All of the engagement around Instagram is being invested in stories and the stickers. And again, a lot of people don't even know about this. So if you're like, what is she talking about right now? You just go to the story. You can do it by clicking on the little plus sign on your icon. And then when you swipe up from the bottom, you're going to get all of these stickers. And so you can ask questions, and there's polling, and there's countdowns, and there's a donate to nonprofit sticker now. So all of that is being built into stories. And then there is a private messaging platform through Instagram. You can actually manage that now via your Facebook page inbox, because again, Facebook owns Instagram, so they are really working hard on integrating all of their private messaging platforms into one centralized platform. So that will become easier over time for all of us to manage. What about little old Twitter? I haven't talked much about Twitter. In some ways, I don't even consider Twitter a social media app. It's really a news app, and that's how they describe themselves, because it's really all about real-time conversation. So commentary on breaking news, observations about what's happening in the news, especially if you have people that are clever or funny on staff. Twitter is great for that. You will often see people sharing tweets, like I said, onto Instagram and onto Facebook, because it's happening on Twitter in real time. The advice from Twitter for success is to have a point of view, both literally and figuratively. It is it's look at this, not look at me. So it really is more about the content and what people are saying on Twitter. And it's really great for PR and media outreach. A lot of people don't even bother doing mass emails of press releases anymore. They just hit up reporters and producers on Twitter, and then when they get a response, then they send them the press release. Customer service, again, it's good for that. What about YouTube? Think of YouTube as a search engine. Just like I'm saying, don't think of Twitter as social, think of it as a news app. Think of YouTube as a search engine. There are almost as many searches on YouTube as there are on Google. Think about how-tos and Q&A content, and it's also entertaining. So it's a great place when you do have lighter content. A lot of that light content that you're putting on stories could be kind of expanded a little bit into a video that you could put on YouTube. And it's also great if you can then drive traffic to your videos via email. Relevant content. What is relevant? Well, it's rewarding, realistic, real-time, responsive, revealing, and/or refreshing. And this is where I am going to skip a whole bunch of slides. So I'm actually going to pause the deck and just skip a whole bunch of stuff. Again, you have all of this in your handouts. Lots of examples about how to do all of those things, how to be relevant. All right, back to the slides. We've jumped miraculously to be practical, create less and share more. This is all about repurposing your content. So think about and ideally do the creative for all of your channels at once, and then share it out and reshare it. You can repost older content. No one is going to scroll back yesterday or a week or God forbid, a month ago to see what you posted. It's just not happening. So it's okay to repost older content that is still working. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, this is how you build trust and influence via social media. Now, if this has been just entirely overwhelming, I have some additional tips for you, and then I'll start taking a couple more questions. So feel free to start chatting those in. It is okay to use social as purely a repurposing channel from your email or web, or to pick one social channel and just repurpose content out of that to other social channels. It is okay for you to hone in on one thing that you're going to do well in each channel. Maybe you decide we are just doing Facebook groups. We're not going to really put much time into what we post onto our newsfeed. We're just going to be all about groups. Or you could say, you know what? We're just going to really focus on doing some cute behind the scenes stuff on Instagram. That's our Instagram strategy. We're just going to do it on stories. That is fine. Do it for you and make it work. Get really good at that. Hone in on simplifying your visuals. Like, stop trying to make everything look new and exciting and different. Pick a theme for what your stuff is going to look like and just go for it. And it's also okay to drop a channel. If you're just in way too many channels, and lots of times when I ask this question, it's like, what channel would you drop if you could? Twitter wins. People want to drop Twitter. It's okay to drop Twitter. It's okay to drop a channel. What I recommend you do in that case is to make a last post and to also change the bio and just tell people we're taking a break from Instagram or Twitter. You know, come see us on Facebook or come see us on Instagram, whatever it is. It's okay. It is okay to not be all this on these channels. I think you have to do something, and it's better to do a little thing well than it is to do a bunch of stuff mediocre. So you have permission from a thought leader in nonprofit communications to drop a channel or to just do one little piece of what I've talked about today well. All right, final question today. Let's do a speed round. Let's see how many we can get in here. I'll try to keep my answers to a sentence or two instead of the, paragraphs.
Okay. Here's the one that we always get asked, but it's always changing. When we post more often and we see engagement go down, is that a bad thing?
Anytime you see engagement going down and you know why, yes, stop doing that thing. The best practice has definitely changed. It's better to post less often, but post really awesome stuff and less frequently.
There's another one. Is there a good editorial calendar planning tool for all these platforms?
You can use any tool you want as long as it helps you see what you need to see. Some people like spreadsheets, some people need calendars. There is not like a special tool that's just fabulous for social. I mean, you can use things like Hootsuite and Buffer to help schedule posts, but that's not really what I consider an editorial calendar. You just need to make your plan in whatever software works for you.
And maybe why don't we stop with this one? This is, are there any worthwhile social media certifications so you can have credibility for yourself or for your organization?
That is a good question. I don't know of any that I would say people in the nonprofit sector know of that they would recognize.
And Kivi, as we kind of close up, I did want to ask you, if people want to reach out to you, do you have a slide here where you have some contact information so they can find out about your other webinars, and how to get your books, and that sort of thing?
Nonprofitmarketingguide.com.
Yeah, that's easy enough.
Yes, and then you can find us on social. You can find me personally, because again, if you want to engage with me rather than the brand, it's Kivi LM, Kivilm. But we certainly have branded channels too.
Well, and everybody take a look for those, write those down if you missed them. But you don't need to worry about writing down too much of this, because some people have already asked about this once again. Just a reminder, this content is being sent to you via email. If you look in the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see the handouts tab right there. And some of this content is right there. And you'll also, again, have that in your email. Plus, under the at the DonorSearch.net site, under the resources tab, you'll find the Flash class content there for all the Flash classes that have been held back to mid-2016. So you can share this with the people in your office who were not exposed to it, and maybe have some nagging doubts and just need to know how to get started, or maybe how to improve what they're doing in terms of practice. And all of this will be there for them too. So our thanks very much to Kivi Leroux Miller for coming in and sharing some of this today. Thank you, Kivi.
It's great to be with you.
And thanks to all of you for being here today and hearing this great stuff. I want to encourage you to come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, when we have Tracy Shaw and Lori Lipstein of Thread Strategies. They're going to be talking to us about smart strategies to build corporate partnerships. You don't want to miss that. And of course, another shout out here today to the fine folks at DonorSearch who provide this platform. We have people at Kivi Leroux Miller talk to us about these issues. And of course, to Terrence Diggs, who has been manning the helm so that we can bring all this to you. Until next time, this is Jay Frost. I'll see you soon. Take care.